John, you need to help us with the new house. $5 million, and you live like a beggar. My brother Eric's voice cut through the silence of the room where I was adjusting my tie, 3 hours before walking down the aisle. He was holding my phone, the screen still lit up with the bank notification that had arrived during the wedding preparations. The blood froze in my veins. The message from my financial advisor congratulating me on reaching $5 million in investments was there, exposed for the whole family to see. "What are you doing with my phone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm as I reached out my hand. Eric backed away, his eyes shining with a mixture of shock and greed I had never seen before. "Man, you're a millionaire and you never told us? While Jennifer and I are struggling to make the down payment on our house, you're sitting there on $5 million. My name is John Mitchell, and at 32 years old, I should be thinking only about Lisa walking down the aisle in 2 hours. Instead, I was watching my carefully constructed life crumble in the hands of my own brother. For 8 years, I had built my fortune through something my family had always considered a waste of time: collecting and reselling rare trading cards, vintage comic books, and sports memorabilia. While Eric followed the traditional path as a bank manager and my parents celebrated each of his promotions, I was the loser who played with cards. The irony was glaring. For all those years, every family dinner followed the same cruel script: Eric detailing his accomplishments at the bank, my parents praising his stability and maturity, while I listened to passive-aggressive comments about, "When are you going to stop playing around and get a real career?" They never asked about the auctions I attended on weekends, about the conventions where I identified rare pieces for ridiculously low prices, about the hours I spent researching market trends and authenticating items. To them, I was just the youngest son who refused to grow up, living in a world of childhood fantasies. "Listen, can we talk about this after the ceremony?" I tried to reason, but Eric was already dialing our parents. "Mom, you won't believe what I just found out about John." The door opened and my mother, Patricia, rushed in, followed by my father, Robert. They were both impeccably dressed for the wedding, but their expressions changed dramatically when Eric showed them his phone screen. It was like watching a transformation in real time, from proud parents to something much more calculating. $5 million, my mother whispered, her voice shaking. "John, is this true?" I could have lied. I could have said it was a mistake, that someone had typed in the wrong number. But something in Eric's greedy gaze, in the way my parents immediately positioned themselves on either side of him as a closed unit against me, made me realize that this moment had been inevitable. "Yes, it's true," I admitted, feeling the weight of my family turn against me like predators who had just caught the scent of fresh blood. My father sat down heavily in the armchair, running his hands over his face. 8 years, John. 8 years of worrying about you, thinking you were wasting your life on these childish hobbies. And you let us worry," my mother added, her voice taking on an accusatory tone I knew well. "How many times did we try to convince you to grow up and get a real job? How many nights did we lose sleep wondering how you would survive in the real world?" Eric laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the room. Meanwhile, the failure of the family was quietly raking in millions. What kind of brother does that? What kind of son lets his parents suffer needlessly? The truth was that, over the past 5 years, I had become one of the leading experts in vintage memorabilia on the East Coast. My ability to identify authentic pieces and predict which items would increase in value had earned me extraordinary profits. A rare Mickey Mantle card from 1952 that I bought for $600 sold for $80,000. A Superman comic book from 1938, found in a thrift store, earned me $120,000. But my family never knew these stories because they never asked beyond, "How's your card business?" Always with that condescending tone that made me feel like a child being tolerated in an adult conversation. "You never asked about my work," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You never showed any real interest in what I do." "Interest?" Eric laughed. "John, you collect Pokemon cards. How could we know that was profitable?" "Because you could have actually asked, instead of assuming I was a failure." The silence that followed was so thick I could almost touch it. My mother exchanged meaningful glances with my father, the kind of silent communication couples develop after decades together. Eric began pacing the room, clearly processing the financial implications of my revelation. "Well, now that we know," my mother said, her posture shifting subtly to something more calculating, "we need to talk about family responsibilities." There it was. The shift I had subconsciously feared all these years. The moment when my value to them would no longer be measured by who I was, but quantified by what I owned. Eric approached, placing his hand on my shoulder with a forced familiarity that made me want to pull away. Brother, Jennifer and I really need help with the down payment on the house. Just $200,000. It's peanuts to you, but it would change our lives completely. If you're following this story and want to know how an entire family can change completely when money is involved, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what they didn't know was that I had learned much more than just collecting over the years. I had learned to read people, to spot fakes and manipulation with the same precision I used to authenticate a rare letter. And in that moment, watching their faces change before my eyes, I began to realize that maybe it was time to apply those skills in a whole new way. What happened over the next 2 hours would change our family forever. It's just a small amount, John, my mother insisted, her voice taking on that manipulative maternal tone I had known since childhood. $200,000 is less than 5% of what you have. For us, it would mean a fresh start. I watched my family physically reorganize themselves in the room, Eric and my parents forming a united front against me. It was fascinating to watch the transformation in real time. 3 people who an hour ago had treated me with condescension now spoke to me as if I were a walking ATM. And it's not just about the house, Eric continued, his voice taking on a calculated urgency. Jennifer is pregnant again. We need more space, a better school for the kids. You have all this money sitting in the bank while your nephew and niece could have a better life. The family guilt card. Classic. Congratulations on the pregnancy, I replied calmly. But that doesn't make my financial achievement an anticipated inheritance for you. My father leaned forward, assuming his serious talk posture that I remembered from my teenage punishments. John, you need to understand that family is about supporting each other. When Eric needed help buying his first apartment, we loaned him $15,000 from our retirement. As far as I know, Eric paid that money back, I replied. It's not about paying it back, my mother interrupted. It's about recognizing that the success of one family member benefits everyone. Your achievements don't exist in a vacuum, John. We raised you, educated you, gave you the foundation to get where you are. The hypocrisy was so thick I could cut it with a knife. For 8 years, they had treated me like a constant source of worry and shame. Every family gathering ended with unsolicited suggestions about real careers and passive-aggressive comments about my phase of collecting. I vividly remembered Christmas 2 years earlier, when Eric had announced his promotion to regional manager. My parents organized an elaborate toast, and my mother even posted on Facebook about having raised a successful businessman. That same night, when I mentioned that I had sold a rare baseball card for $40,000, my father laughed and said, "$40,000? For a little card? Someone actually paid that much." Now, discovering that these little cards had made me a millionaire, the family narrative was being rewritten in real time. "You never asked me about my real job," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You never showed any genuine interest. Now you want to share in the rewards of something you've always looked down on." "That's not fair," Eric retorted, his ears turning red as they always did when he got angry. "We cared about you. We wanted you to have financial stability, a secure future. How could we have known you were making millions selling old junk? Because you could have asked. Because you could have visited my shop. Because you could have shown basic respect for my work instead of assuming I was a failure." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. I could see the 3 of them processing my response, recalibrating their strategies for approaching me. It was like watching a group of salespeople reworking their pitch after an objection. My mother was the first to compose herself, her tears appearing with impressive speed. "John, honey, we may not have been the best at showing interest, but we've always loved you. And now that we know how much you've accomplished, we're proud. Very proud." "Proud now," I repeated. Interesting how pride shows up along with the bank account numbers. "Don't be cruel," my father interjected. "Your mother is trying to get close to you. We all are. Families make mistakes, John, but love remains." Eric took advantage of the emotional opening. "Look, brother, I know I've been hard on you over the years. Maybe I didn't understand what you were building. But now I do, and I want to be a part of it. I want my kids to see their uncle as the successful man you are." The manipulation was masterful. In 15 minutes, they had gone from condescending to proud, from critical to supportive, from skeptical to interested investors. All without a single real admission of error or genuine apology. What about Lisa? I asked. Does she know about this family financial planning meeting? The mention of my fiancé created another awkward moment of silence. Lisa was in the hall with the bridesmaids, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding in the room where I should have been calmly preparing for our big day. Lisa will understand, my mother said quickly. She's a smart girl. She knows how families work. She knows how our family works, I corrected. And she's witnessed years of you treating me like a walking disappointment. Eric snorted, his patience clearly wearing thin. Look, John, you can stand there and dramatize the past, or you can help your family now that you're in a position to do so. $200,000 isn't going to break you, but it will change our lives. And if I say no? The question hung in the air like a live bomb. I could see the gears turning in their heads, calculating how to respond without completely revealing their true motivations. Well, my father finally replied, his voice taking on a colder tone, we hope it won't be necessary. We hope you'll do the right thing. The right thing. The right thing for the family, my mother clarified, but there was a subtle threat in her words. It was at that moment that I began to understand the true nature of what was happening. It wasn't just about money, it was about power, control, and the family dynamics that I had naively hoped would change naturally over time. They weren't proud of my success, they resented having underestimated my capabilities and now wanted to profit from their error in judgment. But what they didn't know was that my experience identifying fakes had taught me much more than object authentication. It had taught me to recognize genuine motivations versus elaborate performances. And in that moment, watching my family operate like a well-coordinated cartel, I began to formulate a response that would meet their expectations. What would happen over the next few hours would test not only my resolve, but also the true limits of what they called family love. The pressure mounted when my mother decided to invoke the dead. Your grandfather Harold would be very disappointed in you, John, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. He always taught us that family takes care of family. Do you remember the stories he told you about how the community pulled together during the Great Depression? It was a low blow, even by her standards. My grandfather had died 5 years earlier, leaving us his modest house and a few $1,000s in savings, which my parents promptly divided between Eric and themselves. I had received only his pocket watch, which they deemed appropriate since I liked old things. What they never knew was that the watch was a 1925 Patek Philippe, valued at $40,000. I never sold it, but the irony was not lost on me. Grandpa Harold also taught me to work hard and build something for myself, I replied. Which is exactly what I did. Eric snorted, walking to the window and then back, clearly agitated. Worked hard. John, you play with cards and comic books. That's not work, that's luck. Luck. I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. 8 years of research, authentication, networking, traveling to conventions and auctions. Tens of thousands of hours learning about market trends, history, preservation. That's luck. Compared to what I did to get where I am, yes, Eric retorted, his voice taking on an aggressive edge. College, an MBA, 10 years climbing the banking ladder. That's building a real career. The hypocrisy was stunning. Eric had gotten his first job at the bank through a referral from my father, who had been a customer of the institution for 20 years. His first promotion came after he married Jennifer, whose family had significant investments in the same company. But he had rewritten that narrative for himself as a story of pure merit. And yet, he said calmly, I have more money than you do. The silence that followed was electric. My father nearly choked on his scotch, my mother's eyes widened, and Eric turned red from his neck to the roots of his hair. That was unnecessary, my mother finally whispered. It was honest, I corrected. Something this conversation has been lacking. Eric took 2 steps toward me, his fists clenched. You arrogant jerk. You think money makes you better than us. No, I replied, standing up to be at the same height as him. But you clearly think money makes me more useful to you. That was when the door opened and Lisa walked in, radiant in her white silk robe, her hair already styled in elegant waves for the ceremony. She stopped abruptly when she sensed the tension in the room. What's going on here? She asked, her eyes moving between our tense faces. My family exchanged quick glances, clearly gauging how to present the situation to my fiancé. Eric was the first to speak, assuming a concerned brother tone that made me feel nauseous. Lisa, we just found out something about John that has changed our perspective on a few things. Lisa frowned, instinctively moving closer to me. What kind of thing? John has $5 million, my mother announced, as if she were revealing that I had a terminal illness. And he never told us. I saw the shock cross Lisa's face, followed quickly by confusion and, to my surprise, something that looked like disappointment. Not disappointment with the money, but with the secrecy. $5 million, she repeated, looking directly at me. John, is this true? Yes, I replied, feeling the weight of yet another relationship being tested by the revelation. It's true. Lisa slowly sat down in the nearest armchair, processing the information. Unlike my family, she didn't immediately start calculating how this would benefit her. Instead, she asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" It was a fair question. Lisa and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. She had seen my modest house, my simple car, my reluctance to spend on luxuries. We had planned a modest wedding, within what she believed to be our limited budget. Because, I began, choosing my words carefully, I've learned that money changes how people see me. And I wanted to make sure you loved me for who I am, not for what I have. But you didn't trust me enough to tell me? Her voice had a fragility that broke my heart. Eric seized the moment of vulnerability. Lisa, you can see the pattern here. John keeps secrets, even from people he loves. But now that we know the truth, he can really help the family. Lisa turned to Eric with a cold expression. Excuse me, what do you mean help the family? Well, my mother interjected, assuming her most persuasive tone, now that John is in a position to do so, we thought it would be appropriate for him to help Eric and Jennifer with the new house. That's what families do, they support each other. I watched Lisa process this information, her eyes moving between my family and my face. She was too smart not to realize what was happening. Let me get this straight, she said slowly. You found out John has money and immediately decided he should spend it on you? It's not like that, my father protested. It's about family responsibility. Responsibility. Lisa repeated the word with the same tone I had used with Luck. Where was this family responsibility when you spent years making John feel like a failure? The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa had just verbalized what I hadn't been able to express clearly throughout the conversation. Eric tried to recover. Lisa, you don't understand the dynamics of our family. I understand perfectly, she interrupted, standing up. You've belittled John's work for years. Now that you've discovered he's successful, you want to profit from it. My mother tried a different approach. Honey, John is a generous man. I'm sure he understands. No, Lisa said firmly. I understand. And what I understand is that you're trying to turn our wedding day into a financial planning session. It was at that moment that something solidified inside me. Seeing Lisa, who had every reason to be upset with me for keeping the financial secret, defending me against my own family made it crystal clear what I needed to do. Get out, I said calmly. Everyone turned to look at me. Excuse me, my mother asked. Get out of my dressing room. Now. Eric laughed, but it was a nervous sound. John, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You turned my wedding day into a family extortion session. You found out about my financial success and immediately started making demands. Now I want you to leave. My father stood up, his expression hardening. John, you're making a mistake. Family is forever. Money comes and goes. You're right, I replied. Family is forever. People who only value me after discovering my bank balance? That's not family. As they reluctantly headed for the door, Eric stopped and turned. You'll regret this, John. When you need us, remember this moment. I will, I promised. I'll remember exactly how you reacted when you found out about my success. After the door closed, Lisa and I stood alone in the heavy silence. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. $5 million, John? $5,200,000, to be exact. She shook her head, a small sad smile playing on her lips. Our marriage is going to be interesting. But what neither of us knew was that the real test was yet to come. Because my family wasn't going to take no for an answer. And in the next 60 minutes before the ceremony, they would demonstrate exactly how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. After my family left, Lisa and I sat in silence for a few minutes. She looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger, and I couldn't blame her. In 3 years of dating, she had known the modest, frugal John who drove a 2008 Honda and bought clothes on sale. "We need to talk about this after the honeymoon," she finally said. "About the secret, about us, about all of this." "I agree," I replied, adjusting my tie for the 100th time. "Lisa, Not now," she interrupted me, but her tone was gentle. "Right now you need to focus on marrying me. We'll figure out the rest later." She got up to leave, but stopped at the door. "John, what your family did here was wrong. Completely wrong. Regardless of the secret you kept, they had no right to turn our wedding day into an extortion session." After Lisa left, I was alone with my thoughts for the first time in hours. I grabbed my phone and saw 15 missed calls from Eric, 8 messages from my mother, and 3 from my father. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I opened my notes app and started making a list. Not a to-do list for the wedding, that had been complete for weeks. A very different list. Mitchell family pressure points, I typed at the top. First item, Eric, outstanding loan from his father's bank for new car. Due in 6 months. Second item, parents, summer house loan still unpaid. Payments overdue since March. Third item, Eric, tax irregularities over the past 2 years. Jennifer reported income inconsistent with expenses. 8 years of being treated like the failure of the family had given me a habit of observing and memorizing details. Not out of malice, but because when you're constantly underestimated, you learn to pay attention to everything. And families that judge success solely by appearances often hide their own financial vulnerabilities. My phone rang. Eric again. This time, I answered. "John, what the hell was that?" His voice was an octave higher than normal. "You can't just kick us out and think this will go away." "Actually, I can. And I just did." "Look here, little brother," his tone changed to something more threatening. "You may have money now, but you still need family. And we have ways of making your life very complicated." "Interesting," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "What kind of complications do you have in mind, Eric?" "Lisa doesn't know everything about you, does she? About how you really made that money. About some of the questionable methods we've seen you use over the years." My blood ran cold. Eric was bluffing, but it was a dangerous bluff. What questionable methods? "Those bargain purchases of yours. It always seemed suspicious to me how you managed to find such valuable items. Maybe Lisa would be interested in learning about your negotiating techniques." It was pure bluff. My methods were completely legitimate, based on knowledge and research. But Eric was suggesting that he would spread rumors about fraud or dishonesty, potentially ruining my reputation in the collectibles market. "I see," I said calmly. "So now we're moving on to emotional blackmail?" "We're moving on to family reality. You help us, we keep your reputation intact. It's that simple." After hanging up, I felt a crystal-clear clarity settle in. My family had just crossed a line that turned this from family drama into open warfare. And in war, the side with the best intelligence and resources wins. I opened my laptop and got to work. First stop, public records. As a bank manager, Eric had access to confidential information. But public records showed that he and Jennifer had used that knowledge to make questionable real estate investments over the past 3 years. Nothing technically illegal, but definitely against the bank's compliance policies. Second stop, my network of contacts in the collectibles world. 3 strategic calls to influential collectors who were also executives at financial firms. Not to spread rumors, that would be stooping to their level, but to document my reputation and legitimate methods. Third stop, my accountant. "Paul, I need a complete audit of my finances for the last 8 years. I want irrefutable documentation of the source of every penny." "Anything specific, John?" "I'm getting married in 2 hours and my family just found out about my financial situation. Let's just say the reactions weren't ideal." Paul laughed bitterly. "Ah, the sudden discovery of family wealth syndrome. I've seen it before. I'll have a full report ready by Monday. My next move was more delicate. I called a private investigator I had used to authenticate some expensive items over the years. Marcus, I need information on a person's tax irregularities. Nothing illegal, just public records and obvious discrepancies. For use in court. Potentially. For defense, not attack. If you're wondering how someone can plan a defense against family blackmail on their wedding day, know that years of being underestimated teach you to move quickly when necessary. By 10:45 in the morning, I had thoroughly documented my financial integrity, identified my accuser's vulnerabilities, and established a damage control strategy. All in 45 minutes, while getting dressed for what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My phone rang again. My mother. John, honey, please. Can we talk like adults? Eric may have overreacted a little, but deep down he's just worried about the children's future. Mom, Eric just called me threatening to spread rumors about my business practices if I don't give him $200,000. Silence on the other end of the line. That can't be right. Eric wouldn't do that. I recorded the conversation, Mom. I can play it back for you if you want. Another silence, longer this time. John, family doesn't sue family. Let's all calm down and talk about this after the ceremony. No, Mom. We're going to talk about this now. You have exactly 2 hours to decide if you want to be guests at my wedding or characters in a public family drama. Because if Eric tries to implement his complications, he'll find out that I have resources he doesn't even dream of. I hung up before she could respond. At 11:15, 15 minutes before I was due to leave for the church, I received a message from the investigator. Eric had 3 personal loans in default, had used the corporate bank card for personal expenses in the last quarter, and Jennifer had reported income as a freelance consultant that didn't match any registered contracts. The plan was ready. Simple, straightforward, and devastatingly effective. But as I adjusted my jacket one last time, part of me still hoped they would back down. That the family I had loved, despite her flaws, would choose love over greed. What happened in the church over the next 3 hours would test not only my resolve, but the true limits of what some people are capable of when money is involved. The ceremony was set to begin in 15 minutes when I received the confirmation I had been waiting for. A simple message from the investigator, documents sent to your email. Explosive. I opened my laptop one last time and smiled when I saw the contents. Eric had completely underestimated who he was dealing with. 3 minutes before I was due to walk down the aisle, my phone rang. Eric again. John, last chance. 200,000 or I'll tell everyone in the church about your dubious business methods. Lisa will be interested to know how you really earned that money. Eric, I replied calmly, you should stop making threats and start worrying about your own issues. What issues? How are you going to explain to the bank why you used confidential client information to make personal investments? Or how Jennifer reported $300,000 in freelance consulting this year without a single documented contract? The silence on the other end was deafening. You're bluffing, he finally whispered. I am? How about checking your email? I just sent you some interesting copies of tax documents and bank records. Oh, and Eric? Your supervisor at the bank, Gerald Morrison, also received an anonymous copy 10 minutes ago. I heard the sound of Eric typing frantically on his keyboard. How did you? John, this is blackmail. No, Eric. This is documentation. The difference is that my methods are legal and yours, well, we'll find out together. I hung up and walked to the door. It was time to get married. The ceremony began perfectly. Lisa looked stunning walking down the aisle, my friends smiled in the front rows, and for a moment I managed to completely forget the family drama. Until, during the vows, I saw Eric whispering urgently into my father's ear in the third row. They were both looking at their phones, their faces growing progressively paler. The priest had just asked if anyone has any objections when Eric stood up. I do, he said loud enough for the entire church to hear. A shocked murmur ran through the guests. Lisa squeezed my hand, her eyes wide. Eric, I whispered, don't do this. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric continued, his voice shaking but determined, you need to know the truth about John Mitchell before you witness this marriage. The pastor looked confused between us. Lisa whispered, John, what's going on? My brother, Eric announced dramatically, has been hiding $5 million from the family for years. And we suspect he may have used illegal methods to obtain that money. The silence in the church was absolute. Every guest was frozen, as if time had stopped. That's when I started to laugh. Not a nervous giggle, but a genuine deep laugh that echoed off the church walls. "Eric," I said, still laughing, "you really want to do this here? Now?" "Yes," he replied, but his confidence was visibly shaken. "People deserve to know who Lisa is marrying." "Perfect," I replied, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "Since we're sharing family information publicly, let me tell you a few things about you." Eric's face instantly turned pale. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the stunned guests, "my brother Eric works at First National Bank as a manager. What you may not know is that he has been using confidential customer information to make personal investments for the past 2 years." "That's not true," Eric shouted, but his voice was an octave higher. "You may also not know," I continued calmly, "that Eric and his wife Jennifer reported $300,000 in consulting income this year, but the IRS couldn't find a single documented contract or client." My father stood up, trying to interrupt. "John, this is inappropriate." "Dad," I said firmly, "sit down. Since Eric has decided to turn my wedding into a public accusation session, let's have complete transparency." I turned to the guests, many of whom were Eric's colleagues and clients from the banking industry. My money came from 8 years of hard work identifying and reselling rare collectibles. Every penny is documented, legal, and properly reported to the IRS. I can prove the source of every transaction. The silence was so thick I could hear the air conditioning running. "Eric, on the other hand," I continued, "can't explain how he paid cash for a $60,000 car last month on a bank manager's salary." I saw several guests whispering to each other, recognizing Eric from his professional interactions. "John, stop," my mother begged, tears streaming down her face. "I can't stop now, Mom. You created this situation." I took a few steps toward Eric, who was visibly sweating. "You want to know the difference between us, Eric? I built my fortune through knowledge and hard work. You tried to build yours through insider information and fraudulent tax returns." Eric tried one last desperate gambit. "He's lying. Have you seen how he lives? Nobody makes 5 million selling cards." "Actually," a voice said from the audience, "it's perfectly possible." Everyone turned to see Robert Chun, one of the East Coast's biggest collectors and a client of mine for 5 years, standing up. "I've known John for years," Robert continued. "He's considered one of the country's leading experts on vintage memorabilia. I've bought several pieces from him, including a rare baseball card for $80,000 that's now worth over $100,000. Another guest, Margaret Williams, also stood up. "John authenticated my vintage comic book collection. His expertise saved me from buying $40,000 in fakes." I saw Eric's face completely fall as he realized he had underestimated not only my success but also my network of reputable contacts. "And as for your accusations about illegal methods," I said, pulling a folder from the altar table where I had discreetly placed it before the ceremony, "here are 8 years of tax records, authentication documents, and letters of recommendation from museums and auction houses." I handed the folder to the pastor, who leafed through it with an impressed expression. "Mr. Eric," the pastor said calmly, "these documents appear to be quite comprehensive and legal." It was at this point that Eric made his most desperate move. "He's blackmailing us," he shouted. "He threatened to ruin our family if we didn't give him money." The irony was so absurd that several people in the audience began to laugh. "Eric," he said slowly, "you called me an hour ago demanding $200,000 and threatening to spread rumors about me if I refused. And you recorded that conversation." The blood drained completely from his face. "Because I recorded ours." I pulled out my phone and played the recording of Eric demanding money and threatening my reputation. His own voice echoed through the church, clear and unmistakable. When the recording ended, there was complete silence until someone in the audience began to clap slowly. Then another. And another. Lisa squeezed my hand and whispered, "Marry me now, you brilliant idiot." Eric was fleeing down the side of the church, followed by my mortified parents, when my phone rang one last time. It was a message from the investigator. "I just got confirmation. The bank has launched an internal audit on Eric. The process should begin Monday." I looked at Lisa, beaming and laughing through tears of relief. "Where were we?" I asked the stunned pastor. "The vows," he replied, still processing what he had just witnessed. "Perfect," I said, turning to Lisa. "Because I have some very important promises to make." But even as we exchanged rings a few minutes later, I knew that the reverberations of this day were just beginning. 6 months after the wedding, Lisa and I were having coffee on the porch of our new home when my phone rang. It was my mother. "John, we need to talk." Her voice was hoarse, tired. "Eric was fired yesterday. The bank audit found serious irregularities." I had been expecting this call since the day of the wedding. The recording I played at the church had only been the beginning. The documents the investigator had found painted a much darker picture of Eric's conduct at the bank. "Is he facing criminal charges?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Probably. They found evidence that he used confidential information for personal investments for almost 3 years. And Jennifer," she paused, sighing deeply. "Jennifer is 4 months pregnant, but she's asking for a divorce." The irony didn't escape me. Eric had spent years treating me like the failure of the family, questioning my financial stability and maturity. Now he was facing criminal charges, divorce, and the prospect of raising a child as an unemployed single father. "What about you guys?" I asked. "How are you dealing with this?" "We lost the summer house," my mother admitted quietly. "We had to use our retirement savings to pay Eric's lawyers. Your father is devastated. He was always so proud of Eric's job at the bank." During the silence that followed, I reflected on how we got there. My family had spent decades building a narrative of success based on appearances, prestige, and social approval. Eric was the successful son because he had a respectable job and followed the conventional path. But real success, I discovered, isn't about impressing others or living up to expectations. It's about building something genuine, sustainable, and ethical. My fortune came from real knowledge, hard work, and integrity, elements my family never valued until the bank account numbers forced a re-evaluation. "Mom," I finally said, "you're welcome to come over for dinner on Sunday if you'd like." "Even after everything?" Her voice was heavy with surprise and relief. "Even after everything. But with one condition: no more comments about money, no requests for loans, no comparisons between siblings. We're family, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to my money." 3 weeks later, my parents came over for dinner. The conversation was tense at first, but we gradually found common ground talking about topics that didn't involve finances. My father showed genuine interest in my collection for the first time, asking detailed questions about authentication and historical value. "I never really understood what you did," he admitted, examining a rare baseball card. "I assumed it was inferior to Eric's work." "Why did you assume that?" I asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question for a long moment. "Because it seemed so simple. You bought things and sold them. Eric dealt with complex finances, banking regulations, corporate clients. It seemed more substantial." "But Eric was cheating," I pointed out gently. "Using insider information and filing false tax returns. My work may seem simple, but it's built on legitimate knowledge and ethics." The transformation in my family was gradual but noticeable. Without Eric dominating conversations with his supposed successes, my accomplishments finally received recognition. More importantly, they began to understand that true value doesn't come from titles or salaries, but from competence, integrity, and authenticity. Lisa adapted surprisingly well to the revelation about my wealth. After long conversations about trust and transparency, we decided to use some of the money to expand my collectibles business and start an educational foundation for young people interested in historic preservation. "I didn't marry your money," she told me one night. "I married your passion. The money is just a result of that passion." Eric, on the other hand, faced severe consequences. The criminal charges resulted in a 2-year prison sentence for bank fraud and money laundering. Jennifer got a divorce and full custody of the children, moving to another state to start a new life. 6 months after his release, Eric called me. His voice was different, less arrogant, more broken. "John, I know I have no right to ask this, but could you meet me for coffee? It's not about money. I just want to talk." We met at a small downtown cafe. Eric looked 10 years older, wearing plain clothes and driving a used car. The physical transformation mirrored the emotional one. I destroyed everything, he said simply. My career, my marriage, my relationship with the kids. And it all started because I couldn't accept that you were more successful than me. What are you going to do now? I asked. I got a job as an accountant at a small company. Basic salary, nothing glamorous. But it's honest. He paused, fidgeting nervously with his coffee cup. I'm in therapy, trying to understand why I always had to compete with you, why other people's success made me feel like a failure. We saw the roles completely reversed. Eric, who had spent decades as the golden son, was now struggling to rebuild his life from scratch. I, the supposed failure, had built not only wealth but a respectable business and a solid marriage. You know what's most ironic? Eric continued. While I was cheating to look successful, you were actually building real success. I envied something I already had but couldn't recognize. Our relationship never went back to the way it was before. Too much water had passed under the bridge. But we found an uneasy peace based on a mutual understanding that we had both learned valuable lessons, albeit through drastically different paths. A year later, I opened my second collectible store and published a book on authenticating vintage memorabilia. The book became a reference in the field, establishing me as a nationally recognized expert. During the book launch, a young collector approached me and said, "Mr. Mitchell, my family always told me that collecting was a waste of time. How did you deal with that?" I smiled, remembering similar conversations I had with my parents years ago. I've learned that other people's judgments about our work say more about their limitations than our potential. The secret is to keep building something genuine, regardless of outside approval. The truth is, Eric tried to humiliate me on the most important day of my life, believing that my wealth was somehow illegitimate or undeserved. But in doing so, he only exposed his own insecurities and questionable methods. Real justice didn't come from my planned revenge, but from the natural consequences of his own choices. If this story of family redemption and poetic justice has touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who turned moments of humiliation into spectacular victories. Because in the end, true success isn't measured by the approval of others, but by the integrity with which we build our lives. Eric learned the hard way that appearances are temporary, but character is permanent. As for me, well, I'm planning to open my third store next year. And this time, my whole family will be at the grand opening, not because I'm rich, but because they finally understand that I've always been successful.